add my voice to Brother Larry's in welcoming you all here today, and we speak to you heartily on behalf of the entire congregation. If you're visiting today, we are very thankful that you are with us. As you see on the screen today, we're going to talk about mighty men of valor, great heroes of faith and of Israel's history that we read about in the Old Testament. These were men of varied character and varied degrees of problems. None of them were perfect, but their exploits were legendary. And their ability to empty themselves and self-sacrifice for the good of the cause wrought for them a place on the pages of God's holy word. And the power of their profound examples speaks lessons to us today that should inspire us. Any Christian, male or female, can learn generically about the service that these men did for the sake of others, just from the standpoint of being a servant. But in today's study, I want to focus on godly manhood, because the world is so messed up in its wretched portrayal of what's right and wrong about proper manhood. The world talks about toxic masculinity, and the deeper you dig into that, the more you realize what a deep lie that all is. We're going to sweep that all aside and not even really speak of it other than to just mention it now, in contrast with what the Bible teaches about godly masculinity. And I do not mean machoism, because if you get caught up in machoism and let that define you, Judgment Day will be your teacher. And you're not going to like what you hear, boys, men, brothers. We're talking about biblically defined masculinity, things that are a part of the duty of what it means to be an honorable, serving, loving man of God. If you will, a mighty man of valor. 2 Corinthians 10 speaks of our Christian warfare as a spiritual fight, fought with spiritual weapons. 1 Timothy 1 and 18, Paul talked to Timothy about waging a good warfare. 1 Timothy 6 and 12, Paul talked to Timothy about fighting a good fight of the faith. In 2 Timothy 2, verse 3 and 4, he talked to Timothy about being a good soldier. The scriptures portray our current Christian service very often in terms of combat. It speaks to us in terms of being a warrior for the cause of God, not a physical fighter who fights in a rage of personal anger, but someone heartily by faith engaged in a spiritual fight for the souls of humans. And as you look at that, you might think, well, a lot of that's focused on Timothy, thinking of his work as an evangelist. I don't doubt that. But those things represent the warfare to which every Christian is called. How long has it been since you've thought about putting on the armor of God? That's armament for battle, y'all. And that's something that's there for every Christian. Ephesians 6, if you'd like to look it up later at your leisure. We are called to a warfare that is spiritual in nature. And in that sense, we can see the comparison that can be made between the physical warriors of Israel's history, mighty men of valor, and the warriors, brothers, that you and I can be for the sake of our families and for the family of God. 1 Chronicles chapter 7 and verse 40 gives us insight into these men when he says, all these were the children of Asher, heads of their fathers' houses, choice men, mighty men of valor, chief leaders. And they were recorded by genealogies among the army, fit for battle. Their number was 26,000. Now think about this robust language that defines and describes the character that represents who and what these men were. Choice men, chief leaders, the cream of the crop. Brothers, God has not called you to be average. God has called you to be exceptional. Boys, young men, the next time your pouty lip is hanging out because mom or dad or some other authority figure in your life is talking to you about rising above the average, remember being a choice man. Remember being chief. Not for your own glory or recognition, but for the good of those that you serve. Let's talk about what these men were. Well, they were family leaders. Think, for example, of 1 Chronicles 5, verse 24, where he talks about these that were heads of their fathers' houses: Isher, Ishai, Eliel, Azriel, Jeremiah, Hodaviah, and Jadiel. They were mighty men of valor, famous men, and heads of their fathers' houses. They were leaders in their family. What made them leaders? Listen, it wasn't hubris and self-exaltation or self-promotion. What brought them to that point of leadership, what made them famous men, was the nature of their life, their deeds. The fact that they fought hard, that they worked hard for the good of others and in service to others. These men are said to be fit for battle. 1 Chronicles 7:11 talks about the sons of Jadiel were heads of their father's house, where there were 17,200 mighty men of valor, fit to go out for war and battle. These guys were prepared for the fight that they faced as soldiers in Israel's army. And so there is clearly within that comparison to our warfare today, the idea, brothers, of you taking responsibility to see that you are prepared for the spiritual fight that we all face as men of God. That does not happen by accident. That happens only by deep and persistent intentionality in the effort to be a mighty man of valor. These men are said to be willing servants in 2 Chronicles 17:14 through 16, reaching beyond the reign of David into a future time in Judah's history. He said, these are their numbers according to their father's house of Judah, the captains of thousands, Adnah the captain, and with him 300,000 mighty men of valor. And the next to him was Jehohanan the captain, with him 280,000. And next to him was Amasiah the son of Zichri, who willingly offered themselves to the Lord. And with him 200,000 mighty men of valor. These were not men that laid aside what they liked and what they preferred grudgingly and grumbled about it all the while. These were men that willingly offered themselves, not for the sake of themselves, not for their own aggrandizement or their own making themselves look good. These are men that did this for the Lord's sake. They looked beyond themselves to a cause greater than them, and that is the cause for which they fought. And in doing that, they worked to help others. 1 Chronicles 12:21, they helped David against the bands of raiders, and they were all mighty men of valor, and they were captains in the army. 1 Chronicles 12:21. What was their function? What was the net effect of their work? They helped David. David was the king. So when you're helping the king, that means you're helping the nation. It wasn't about me. It wasn't about self. It was about the cause. It was about being a servant of others. Let's look at what they did. They acted with courage and initiative. When David became Israel's king and he was seeking to take the city of Jerusalem from the Jebusites, he employed and made good use of his mighty men of valor, one of which we read about here in 1 Chronicles 11:6. Now David said, whoever attacks the Jebusites first shall be chief and captain. And Joab, the son of Zeruiah, went up first and became chief. Now, if you know much about Joab's history, you know that he was not a perfect man. He had flaws. But lacking courage and initiative was not one of them. The dude was brave, and the dude took the initiative. In a parallel account to this, David observes that the way into the city that you guys can take without breaching the walls to go in through this water drain pipe. So he says, whoever's brave enough to go up that waterway, that's why it's pictured in the way that you see it on the screen. Whoever's brave enough to do it, you ask for volunteers. And the air didn't hang silently stale very long before a man of courage and honor stood up and said, I'll do it. That's initiative. I want to tell you guys, especially you young fellows, as you identify your older brothers in church that are nearing the end of their way, you identify the ones who have achieved in life with their families and with their work in the kingdom what you hope to someday achieve. Talk to them and ask them questions and listen to their stories. If you can get them to talk, one of the things you're going to find out is persistently through their lives, they showed initiative. They took risks. They didn't rest back in the laurels of safety and comfort. They lunged forward into danger to meet their obligations, to fulfill their tasks, and to make themselves a blessing to others. Initiative. Courage. These men, by the effect of what they did, strengthened the ruler and the nation. 1 Chronicles 11, verse 10. Now these were the heads of the mighty men whom David had, who strengthened themselves with him in his kingdom, with all Israel, to make him king, according to the word of the Lord concerning Israel. This passage is dripping with purpose. It is oozing out the very pores of everything this verse says, of what it means to be a mighty man of valor. It was about strengthening themselves, but not for themselves. They were strengthening themselves with David in his kingdom, as the Lord had decreed. You see that language? The magnitude of their mighty efforts was on behalf of everybody but themselves. They were thinking about the Lord's will, they were thinking about the leaders of God's people, and they were thinking about God's people in all of their exploits. That's the passion that drove them. And they enjoyed great victory by God's help. These stories are delicious. If you like a little bit of excitement and adventure, look in 1 Chronicles 11 and verse 11. This is the number of the mighty men whom David had. Jashobeam, the son of Hachmonite, chief of the captains. He had lifted up his spear against 300 killed by him at one time. Wow. That is a dude. Read about the next one in 1 Chronicles 11, verse 12 to 14. After him was Eleazar, the son of Dodo, to the Ahohite, who was with the three mighty men, and he was with David at Pasdammim. Now there were the Philistines were gathered for battle, and there was a piece of ground full of barley. So the people fled from the Philistines, but they stationed themselves in the middle of that field, defended it, and killed the Philistines. So the Lord brought about a great victory. Observe that the great things they did was God working through them. And that is a key component to being a mighty man of valor. You're doing a work that seeks the will of the Lord, and when you're doing it in accordance with what the Lord teaches in the spiritual fight in which we're engaged, the successes you achieve amount to God working through you, and an humble man knows it. It's not me, it's not my strength, it's not my might, it's the Lord. Look at other victories they had by God's help. In 1 Chronicles 11 and verse 20, Abishai, the brother of Joab, was chief of another three. He had lifted up his spear against 300 men and killed them, and won a name among these three. Won a name. I bet you go out and battle and single-handedly kill 300 of the enemy, you'll get to be known. I want to tell you, brothers, you're fighting an enemy more ferocious than a Philistine warrior. You better get that figured out, guys. Boys, you better listen to this. You will lead your family someday, God willing, in battle against a foe that is much greater than an entire horde of Philistine warriors or what other of the worst of the kind that you could imagine that was enemies of God's people in that distant day. And you're not ready for that by accident. And you won't win without God's help. In 1 Chronicles 11, verse 22 and 23, if you force me to name a favorite, this one might be it. Benaiah was the son of Jehoiada, the son of a valiant man from Kabzeel, who had done many deeds. He had killed 2 lion-like heroes of Moab. He also had gone down and killed a lion in the midst of the pit on a snowy day. And he killed an Egyptian, a man of great height, 5 cubits tall. In the Egyptian's hand there was a spear like a weaver's beam. And he went down to him with a staff, wrestled the spear out of the Egyptian's hand, and killed him with his own spear. I want him to make that one into a movie. Wouldn't that be exciting? Victory by God's help. What they did was they made risks, they took risks, and did so unselfishly, not for their own glory, but disregarded their personal good for the sake of the cause that they served. 1 Chronicles 11, 16 through 19, David was in the stronghold, and the garrison of the Philistines was then in Bethlehem. That's David's hometown. And David said with longing, "Oh, that someone would give me a drink of water from the well of Bethlehem, which is by the gate." Now I'm going to stop reading for just a second and talk about this. If you grew up on a place out in the country where you had good well water, you'll identify with this story. Where Mike and I grew up, we had well water. And it was good. We got old enough that our lives took us to other places and we would live in different towns. Sometimes we would just kind of randomly opine, "Boy, I'd like to have a good cold drink of that well water." Which cued the lecture about city water and all of its chlorine and how bad we hated it. Thankful for water filtration now that kind of spares me that taste. C. Anderson for all your water filtration needs. That's a free one. That's his reward for picking out great songs to go with today's study. Oh, I'd like a good cold drink of that well water. That didn't mean we'll get in the car and go to the well and draw some and then come back. That didn't mean that. And that's what David's doing here. He doesn't mean for his guys to take off and, well, we better go break through enemy lines and go put our lives at risk getting some water from the Bethlehem well and bringing it. That's not what he means. He didn't have to mean that. It says in verse 18, the 3 broke through the camp of the Philistines, drew water from the well of Bethlehem that was by the gate, and took it and brought it to David. Wow. That is so cool. Just because their leader had a craving. You know, he could meet his needs for hydration without having that water. This is extra effort. This is more than what's necessary. Boys, if you want to know how to serve your family someday, listen to this. If you want to know how to love your wife and lead your wife and father your children, then open up your ears and listen. They just took off and did it. You could have died. Look at David's reaction to this. It sounds kind of cavalier and ungrateful if you don't understand what's behind what he did. So let's talk about it. Nevertheless, David would not drink it, but poured it out to the Lord. And he said, "Far be it from me, O my God, that I should do this. Shall I drink the blood of these men who have put their lives in jeopardy? For at the risk of their lives they brought it." Therefore he would not drink it. These things were done by the 3 mighty men. Now, looking at this casually, like just a random story, you know, we're picturing these guys fighting their way back, you know, water jug in one hand, sword in the other, and, you know, a weaver's beam held with their toes so they can stab people that way. Just impossible heroes, right? And they're fighting their way through the thing, and they defeat all the Philistines, and they get the water, and they come back, and he just dumps it out. You know, and I'm thinking, what? We just went, did you see? And then you just poured it out. That's not what happened here. Under Moses' law, there were certain regulations that called for a variety of different kinds of sacrifices, one of which was a drink offering. And there would be a drink that would be very valuable, that would be regarded as holy and special. And it could not be used for ordinary purposes. And they would, in a ritual way, they would pour that out as an offering to the Lord, as opposed to receiving it for themselves. The same language that describes the holiness of that drink offering under Levitical law is used here to describe what David did. He did not casually discard what these men did for him. He elevated it to a whole new level of significance, and by their familiarity with Israel's laws and customs, they would have recognized what might otherwise escape our attention. This was more than just drinking it down and saying, "Thank you, boys." Much more. What David did assigned an even greater value to their sacrifice and spoke a greater level of appreciation. Because what he did said, men, when you put your lives at risk, that made everything about what you just did as holy as a sacrifice to the Lord. And he very poignantly emphasized its holiness by pouring it out to the Lord there, and they knew it. I want you to remember, not just through the course of this study, please through the course of this study, but not just through the course of this study, I want you to remember all your lives, men, that unselfish sacrifice made for the cause of God's people and your obligations at the hand of God within your family are holy. Just as holy as a drink offering. Because you're sacrificing yourself for someone else. The Lord chose to include this in a narrative for a reason, and this screams a lesson to us about the importance of understanding it's not about you, and it's not about me. It's about my God and His church and my family, and that is the end of the list of who it's about. We look at these lessons with intentional eyes, calling to mind Paul's lessons in Romans 15 and verse 4 that says, whatever things were written before were written for our learning, that we, through the patience and comfort of the Scriptures, might have hope. The Spirit inspired Paul to say this to help us understand all these old stories from the Old Testament are more than just really cool stories about some guy that fought, what was that, a snow beast? I mean, the Moabite lion-like warriors, were they genetically altered? I mean, what in the world's going on in these fantastic stories? It's amusing, it's amazing, it's stirring, but it has meaning. And this is the Lord's way of telling us, look at all of these stories, not just the mighty men of valor. Those are the ones we're talking about today. But you look at all of these with a purpose and an intent to learn something. They were reputable leaders, weren't they? And boys, that's what you need to be. Proverbs 22 and verse 1, a good name is to be chosen rather than great riches, loving favor rather than silver and gold. Any ability you have to lead has got to be based on your reputation of being an honorable and godly man. Well, I'll never be an elder in the church. Some of you won't. I pray to God that some of you will. And if you will someday, this tells you the basis of your leadership. It's your good name. It's your reputation. But if you're not going to be an elder in the church, you'll be a leader in your home. Think about that. Being a father, being a husband, that's a role of leadership. This tells you how to do it. Well, but I'm not married, not going to be married. I mean, there's a few guys out there that are single and plan to stay that way. You know, you might be a leader at work. You might be a leader in the community, in some community role you play. You might just be a leader by virtue of your influence and your impact on others, the younger people in the family of God looking to you and your example. It might be a low-key, casual kind of leadership. But, it seemed to me like everybody has some kind of leadership. And if you want to positively impact others, it starts with being known as a mighty man of valor. You've got to lead your wife in this way. Ephesians 5:25 says, husbands, love your wives just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for her. Do you see that self-sacrifice? Do you remember those men who sacrificed to themselves to provide a cold drink of cherished well water to David that he remembered from his growing up years? There's no cold water like the cold water that comes out of the well on that old red clay hill 5 miles southwest of Duncan. There's just no other place like it. You know, that self-sacrifice that makes that happen made that holy. And so, brethren, when we learn to love our wives in a self-emptying, self-sacrifice, it's not about me sort of way. It's a deed that the throne of God looks upon with favor and says, that is holy. And all of a sudden, you learn that you are a priest of God, pouring out a set-apart drink offering that the pages of God's holy words commends and holds in highest esteem because you sacrificed to make it happen. 1 Peter 3:7, husbands, likewise dwell with them with understanding, giving honor to the wife as to the weaker vessel, and as being heirs together of the grace of life, that your prayers be not hindered. Honor her, cherish her, treat her with respect. Do that in the way that you serve her. Dwell with her with a sense of understanding. Most of the married guys right now just said, well, then I'm out because I don't understand her. Well, welcome to the club. Well, I'll tell you what you can understand. The will of God for you as a husband. Understanding her may be high-level calculus and four-dimensional chess, and, that's for somebody else. But what God wants us to understand is what it means to empty yourself for her. Girls, you have the mark of what to look for, accept nothing less, and be the wife that's equal to that. If you want a little tidbit in this study for you, be a wife that's equal to that level of giving and love and self-sacrifice. Be a reputable leader with your children. Ephesians 6:4, you fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath, but bring them up in training and admonition of the Lord. The children need to know him as a man of God. They need to know his reputation. They need to know that dad is a student of the Word and that dad is trying to learn to live by what he learns in that Word. And they know he's not a perfect man. If they hadn't figured it out yet, give them a little time. They'll figure it out. But they see in the melee, in the midst of his battle against the wicked one, they see a man who's striving to be that mighty man of valor. And based on that reputation, he can lead them. And he will do so sacrificing himself. Do not leave this exclusively to your wife. Look, I've already said we're fighting evil forces. And I'm going to tell you what I've told a lot of young men as they become fathers. You are in a battle with Satan for the souls of your children. Wake up and get your nose in that book. Learn it and live it. For the love of all that's decent and holy, you're in a battle with Satan for the eternal fate of your children. Think about that. Now, if someone comes to the door and tries to kick down the door and come in and harm your family, and we're interviewing you in that moment, And they ask, well, what about that intruder that's trying to get in the door? Oh, I leave those kind of problems to the little woman. What would you think of that guy? Oh, I'll let her handle that stuff. We would not have a favorable opinion of that man. We would wonder why he didn't jump in front of his wife and get between her and the door and tell her to go to safety. And I'm going to stand here and fight this battle for the sake of my family. That would be our thought process. Well, it's the devil. That didn't already occur to you. That wants in your home and he wants to take it over. We sang about having good Christians' homes today, didn't we? And this is the kind of thing it takes. Well, the devil's not at the door ringing the doorbell. He's that voice in your kid's ear out there in the world somewhere. It may be school, work, at the grocery store. It may be through media that they consume. It may be in a book that they read. I don't know, but it's out there. And the devil's trying to get into your children's heart. You need to stand at the door of their heart and fight that battle like a courageous man. And that means your kids know who and what you are before God and what your goal is to be. And they know they can count on you to be there for them, to instruct them. You need to be fit for every good work. And this cuts a wide swath through the field of duty that is before us. That's an all-encompassing terminology there. Fit for every good work. Remind them to be subject to rulers and authorities, to obey, to be ready for every good work. Just describing general Christian character for all of us, male or female. He says, just be ready for good work. Now let's narrow that to applying it to the men. Was it last Sunday or the Sunday before last, some recent Sunday in the afternoon service, Brother Dale talked about lining up the singers, and he talked about asking some of our young men to help and how much it pleased him that they were so willing to help. It's so comforting in a deep and meaningful and long-term way to see young men ready to step up and how can I help? Not so they can be seen in front of others or be thought highly of, but just to help. And it's not just here leading the services. It's back there setting out chairs or putting them back up or some other deed. There's people that needs to be visited. There's songs that need to be sung. There are prayers that need to be prayed. There are words of encouragement that need to be texted to somebody. Be ready, not lazy. Not, well, but I'd rather. It's not about you. The quicker you get over that, the happier man you'll be. It's not about you. You do these other things and be ready for every good work, and you'll find out what real fulfillment means. And it's not at the end of a game controller. It's not at the end of your favorite entertainment. It's not in the midst of whatever your favorite pleasure is. It's in being the kind of servant that the Scriptures call a mighty man of valor. That's where your greatest and most lingering and meaningful joy will be found. So be ready. And one of the good works that we can emphasize are works that relate to taking care of your family, and others works that relate to take care of the church. Hear how he described it in Colossians 1 and 10. Walk worthy of the Lord, fully pleasing him, being fruitful in every good work, and increasing in the knowledge of God. This is a life of abundant fruit. Fruitful. We know what full means, don't we? In good works. And let's start that one at home, taking care of your family. Mike and I were talking about this passage recently, 1 Timothy 5 and 8, and he said, David, I really think we failed to really emphasize this the way we should have through the years, and I think Mike might be right. If anyone does not provide for his own, and especially for those of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. Boys, whether or not you make a living for your family, the Lord puts your very faithfulness before God on the line as to whether or not you do that. Now, I know what you're going to hear out there. What you're going to hear out there is follow your dreams. And I'm going to remind remind you of the guy who took initiative and set aside his personal safety and charged up the water pipe and opened the door to take over the city and give it to his king. Now you know what that means. So I'm going to tell you something else. You need to forget about following your dreams, because it's not about you. Maybe this is a better way to say it. Make taking care of your family your dream, and then follow that. Well, but I want a job that, you know what? Mama used to say, you want one hand spit in the other and just see which one will fill up first. There's a lesson in that, fellas. It's not about what you want. I'm sorry, it's just not. It's about you choosing to do what God has called you to do. And near the top of that list, how do you get any higher on the list than determining whether or not you've denied the faith? How do you get higher on the list than that? Take care of your family. I love to think about Jacob when I think about this. Genesis 25 and 27 gives us insight into his preferences when it says that the boys grew and Esau was a skilled hunter, a man of the field, but Jacob was a mild man dwelling in tents. He was just a mild-mannered fella, kind of a homebody. That's not necessarily ethically wrong. That was just his natural preferences. The idea of being out on the cold ground on a frosty night was not near the top of his list. Now, his brother didn't mind that, especially if he was hunting. That was the fun place to be, but you know, Jacob just didn't feel that way. Well, he had to leave home. You can look the story up later and read more about why, but he had to leave home. And when he left and got to where he was going, the grass did not grow under his feet very long before he found a job of being outside all the time in the cold, doing what he hated. Sounds miserable, doesn't it? If you choose to go later and read the story, one of the things you'll read is part of the reason he got that job was to earn 2 wives from his father-in-law / employer. That was part of the deal they made to get the wives, kind of a dowry, you might say. He had to work for each one of them 7 years. You know, the Bible tells us in the narrative of that story that it just didn't seem very long to him because of the love that he had for his family. Boys, when you figure out that it's not all about you, and you do this because you care about your family, and you want to be a mighty man of valor, you'll wake up one day and realize, you know what, this is not so bad. And the this I'm talking about might be a job you really don't like. I had to get a lot of miles on me before it really occurred to me how much Dad did not like his job. And it wasn't the work. He enjoyed the work. It was the people that he worked for. And the corrupt way they've handled themselves and the corrupt way they treated their employees. I won't go deeper into that. That's just what it was like. Some of you may know the saying, people don't quit jobs, they quit bosses. But here's the thing. That was Dad's best option to take care of us. And there were times he worked shift work, swinging shifts. So it might be that one summer afternoon when Mike and I were at the end of the driveway living our best life, playing, pondering running away, whatever that was about, he would pull out the driveway and take off down that old gravel road in his old beat-up Dodge pickup. And I can remember stepping out on the road watching that pickup bounce down the rough road that he traveled to a rougher job. Had no idea that what was going through his mind was bracing himself for things he was going to have to put up with. When he got home, you didn't know it. Because he just talked about you and about Mama and about his family and about the Lord and about the church. I'm sorry if you don't like that job. Does it take care of your family? Make sure you check that box first. And then when you get that box checked, well, if you can find a more agreeable job, then more power to you. I hope you can. Some people are able to do that. But understand what matters most. Now, Jacob eventually talked about it. It was when he and his boss / father-in-law had a parting of the ways. And 20 years of built-up frustration found their way out as the proverbial dam broke, and he poured forth a river of words that said how he felt about his job. In Genesis 31, beginning at 38, he said, "These 20 years I've been with you. Your ewes and your female goats have not miscarried their young, and I have not eaten the rams of your flock. That which was torn by beasts I did not bring to you. I bore the loss of it. You required it from my hand, whether stolen by day or stolen by night. There I was, in the day the drought consumed me, and the frost by night, and my sleep departed from my eyes. Thus I have been in your house 20 years. I served you 14 years for your 2 daughters, and 6 years for your flock. And you have changed my wages 10 times. That's everybody's dream resignation speech right there. Here's everything that I hated about this job. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is not to say that's the way you ought to quit. That's not my point. My point is to help us all understand he felt this way all the while. He was a mild man. He was, a homebody. He did not like his work, but that's what was required to care for his family, and so that's what he did. Boys, are you listening? It's not about you and your dreams. It's about your obligation to your family, and if you'll fulfill that, someday your kids will remember your pickup bouncing down the road, and they'll understand how much Dad sacrificed for them and did for them. You think about that as you think about being a mighty man of valor. The Scriptures make this a serious matter. In 2 Thessalonians 3, regarding the person who will not work but is lazy, he says to avoid their company except to admonish them for their laziness. And that's those who don't work to provide for their necessities. In 1 Timothy 6, the first 5 verses, he talks about the Christian ethic of being a good employee and how you approach fiscal responsibility and things like that. And he instructs us to withdraw from those who teach contrary to these ideas of hard work and all that we've been talking about. Is it serious to God? Have we underplayed and underemphasized 1 Timothy 5 and 8? I think so. And if you want to have a meaningful, joyful life, take note of these lessons and understand those mighty men of valor did brave and courageous things because they were hard things. That's what made them special. You're not going to find special if you're not willing to do the things that are hard and the things that require you to stay up late and get up early and make sacrifice and lay down whatever it is that you like so much in order to pick up something else that matters more. You do this to serve, and you serve others in the church. Read the admonition to young men in Titus 2, verse 6 through 7. Likewise, exhort the young men to be sober-minded in all things, showing yourself to be a pattern of good works, in doctrine showing integrity, reverence, incorruptibility. A pattern of good works, that's a work of service for the benefit of others. But look at what that includes. That includes having integrity in what you teach and what you stand for and what you say. That can't come from an empty head. And so you get in from that difficult shift and you feel tired. I'm going to remember Dad again. You grab the rolling desks that you built and you roll it over in front of your recliner and you get busy studying, because that's what you've got to do. And I don't mean studying for a test. I mean studying the Word of God. Well, but I don't feel like it. Doesn't matter, not about you. A young friend in the church told me the other day about times he's working from home, and when his toddler son comes scratching on the office door. Make time. Pick them up, be their dad. Well, but if I do, I won't get my work done. Then stay up late. Then do it when he needs mama. Well, but that's hard. That's right. And sacrifice is what makes it holy. So you do whatever you got to do. You give up whatever you've got to give up that pertains to you. And you embrace what pertains to serving for the good of others. And it's not just your family, it's the church. You do this willingly because you willingly follow Christ. In Matthew 16 and 24, Jesus said to his disciples, if anyone desires to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. Willingly serve like those mighty men of valor. They did hard things, but they did them because of the Lord that they served, and that's what drives our engine, isn't it? 2 Chronicles 32 and verse 21 talks about a different group of mighty men of valor. Said the Lord sent an angel who cut down every mighty man of valor, leader and captain in the camp of the king of Assyria. So he returned shamefaced to his own land. And when he had gone into the temple of his God, some of his own offspring struck him down with a sword there. Here a whole host of mighty men of valor died because they didn't do what they did in service to God. Your service is empty if you're not doing it as a follower of Christ. We sang about that this morning, didn't we? Willingly following. That's got to be what motivates you, because if you're doing it just to be a stud muffin yummy cake, it doesn't amount to beans if it's not focused on God. What did he say in Psalms 127 verse 1? Unless the Lord builds the house, they labor in vain who build it. Unless the Lord guards the city, the watchman stays awake in vain. Get it in our minds, brothers. We do what we do because of him and because of our service to him, and that's what connects us to success. And in doing that, we help the kingdom. And that comes to the reading of the morning in Philippians 2, verse 19 through 24. I trust in the Lord Jesus to send Timothy to you shortly, that I also may be encouraged when I know your state. For I have no one like-minded who will sincerely care for your state. For all seek their own, not the things which are of Christ Jesus. But you know his proven character, that as a son, with his father, he served with me in the gospel. Paul here thankfully recalled his ability to count on Timothy and send Timothy to go and tend to the spiritual need for the kingdom of God. Does it sound to you like he's describing in Timothy a mighty man of valor? Remember all those verses at the opening of the study where Paul told Timothy to be a good warrior? He's telling him to be a mighty man of valor and to do it for the Lord. And now he's telling others, you know, I can count on Timothy like I can count on nobody else. That's your goal. Guys, that's your goal. That's what you want to grow up to be. And if you're already grown, then that's what you want to grow to be. It fills my heart to think of how many brothers here that I can reach out to and call upon and know I can rely on them just like Paul relied on Timothy. There are young men who've come through our home through the years that live in other places and tend to the kingdom and their families in other places, and I can reach out to an innumerable amount of those guys and say, hey, I need your help. The other day, a guy sat in my home and we were talking about a project that I didn't want to undertake because it was so labor intensive. I felt like it would not be worth the return on the investment of labor, and I still feel that way. He said, David, do you know how many guys you could call and have show up here on your doorstep right now? I said, I know. But they're doing other things that are more important than this job that we're talking about doing, so I'm not sure I want to make that call. Man, that's quite a feeling. That's what it's like to be in God's family. To know there are people you can count on. to do what they do to strengthen the king and the nation. I hope this morning's reading, boys, will stay stuck in your mind. Because there are also guys that I could call or text or email or send up smoke signals or whatever, and I can count on them to not do anything. Because it's hard. You see what God is calling you to do. I don't know how well this story illustrates this idea of it's not all about me, but I want to tell this story, and I hope it illustrates the idea. Recently, Tanya and I were in the hardware store, and she and I have conversed about this and about trying to interact with other people in a meaningful way that makes it about them and not about you. And I had an opportunity in the hardware store, minding my own business, looking for stuff, and this dude comes up and says, "You know, I can't eat peanuts." In the context, it made sense. Just stay with me. She fled. I saw her and the basket were a blur, headed to points yonder. Now, a man of honor would stay and say, "This guy wants to talk, so I'm going to make it about him." I wish I could tell you that that's why I stayed put, but I was just morbid curiosity. I had to know where this was going. So I'm not a hero in this story, but it's the kind of story that represents what you can be, fellows. Let's make it about this guy. So I waited. Didn't have to wait long. "I can't have peanuts because I ain't got any teeth." And he grinned real big. Why do these things always happen to us? I was looking at my daughter Elise when I said that, because she's reliving right now these same kind of conversations with people. I listened to his story. And as I went from station to station looking for the things that we were there to look for, he followed me. Before it was over, I learned about the great deal he got on that welder and all the accoutrements of welding. Thought of you, brother. He got a bargain. I have no idea why he thought I needed to know, but he did. No, he didn't. He just wanted to talk. Now, that's maybe a semi-humorous representation of he finally fizzled out and I was able to go on about my day. He didn't follow us to the car. That's better than how it goes sometimes. But that illustrates how life confronts us with opportunities to understand. It's not about me, it's about the other person. Now, if I'd been in a hurry and there was an emergency because I had an obligation to go do something for somebody else, maybe I couldn't indulge that guy in that moment. So we prioritize our obligations, but in every moment, at every turn, we're thinking, this is not about me. Difficult that it may be to hear from his toothless countenance why he can't have peanuts. Take time and invest in other people. I labored over the presentation of the diagrams in this study. I've talked to David J., my son-in-law, about it quite a bit, about, these are comic book characters that we put on the screen. Surely you noticed that. When you read their stories, it almost feels like comic book characters, doesn't it? But they were real. Their existence and exploits can be verified by history. It hadn't been that long since there was an exhibit on the north side of the metro that verified the existence of David and all these claims that are made about his throne. And they were heroes of God's people. Well, why depict them that way? There he is. Just some random dude with a family. Let's say he's a part of the church. There's load he's carrying on his shoulders you may not see. And it's the care of those people in that picture that they're so dear to him. And there's concerns about the church and the weight of the obligations that he feels related to all of that to be who he's supposed to be in the kingdom of God, and think about everybody else's needs but his own. And some of you men are that guy. And to the world, you're just comic book fiction. I'm telling you, the world says you don't exist. And I mean literally says you don't exist. When confronted with you, they lie about you and say, well, that's toxic masculinity. Hell will teach those voices otherwise. I said what I said. They'll say, well, it's not authentic. If you could see under the surface, you'd see the selfish. They don't think you're real. But to your family, you're real. And the sacrifices you make, in their eyes, make you a hero. And to God, it makes you holy. Poured out like a drink offering, special, set apart, so different from any of the garbage we encounter in this wretched life, so ruined by sin. Rise up and be that man. The mighty man of valor. You cannot do it without the Lord's help. And the Lord's help starts with you becoming a Christian. And if you've not done that, we want to help you to do that this morning, if you're so inclined. There are elders here that will be very happy to baptize you into Christ. If you need explanation as to what that involves, they'll be happy to help you in that way. If you need the church to pray for you, to assist you in your quest to be a mighty man of valor, the church will be glad to pray for you and help you with study and counsel. Whatever you need, we're here for you. And if the need you have is present in this moment and we can assist you now, come forward, have a seat on the front while we stand and while we sing the invitation song.